like one of his animals. The Jew and the rooster are one. After fighting with his dead brothers and his dead sisters, he chose to paint the dead rooster of his youth, thinking God wouldn't mind a rooster, would he? Or thinking a rooster would look good in a green armchair with flecks of blood on his breast and thighs, his wings resting a little, their delicate bones exposed, a few of the plumes in blue against the yellow, naked body, all of those feathers plucked, as if by a learned butcher. And yet the head hanging down, the comb disgraced, the mouth open as if for screaming, the right front chair leg, seen from a certain angle, either a weapon or a strong right arm, a screaming arm, the arm of an agitator. And yet at the same time, the chair as debonair as any, the brown mahogany polished, the carving 19th century, the velvet green and old velour, as if to match the plumes a little, a blue with a green. No rabbi was present, this he knew, and no dead butcher had ever been there with his burnished knife and his bucket of sand. This was the angry rooster that strutted from one small house to another, that scratched among the rhubarb. He is the one who stopped as if he were thinking. He is upside down now and plucked. It looks as if his eye can hardly contain that much of sorrow, as if it wanted to disappear, and it looks as if his legs were almost helpless. And though his body was huge compared to the armchair, it was only more horrible that way, and though his wings were lifted, it wasn't for soaring. It was more for bedragglement and degradation. Whatever else there was of memory, there had to be revenge there, even revenge on himself. For he had to be the rooster, though that was easy. He was the armchair too, and he was the butcher. It was a way to understand. There couldn't be another. He had to paint like that. He had to scrape the skin and put the blotches on. And though it was grotesque to put a dead rooster in an armchair, his table could have been full, or he just liked the arrangement, or he was good at painting a chair and it was done first, although I doubt it. Or someone brought in the bird, a kind of gift, for food was cheap then, and roosters were easy to cook. But it was more than anything else a kind of Tartar, a kind of Jew he was painting, something that moved from Asia to Europe, something furious, ill, and dreamy, something that stood in the mud beside a large wooden building and stared in a cloud. It was so deep in thought, and it had tears in a way. There was no getting around that kind of thinking. Even if he stood in the middle of the room, holding his paintbrush like a thumb at arm's length, closing one of his eyes, he still was standing in the mud shrieking. He still was dying for corn. He still was golden underneath his feathers with freckles of blood, for he was a ripped open Jew, and organs all on show, the gizzard, the liver, for he was a bleeding Tartar, and he was a Frenchman dying on the way to Paris, and he was tethered to a table. He was slaughtered. So I'm going to read from a few poems from Save the Last Dance. Save the last dance for me. This is dedicated to my dear friend Grace Paley, loving memory of Grace Paley. I got introduced, I can't remember, reading recently, and the guy who introduced me mentioned this introduction and talked endlessly about Grace Paley, and nothing about me. I mean, I'm happy to hear it. That's quite close. All right, I don't know why I thought of that. So a poem called My Dear. Now, I had a friend in Western Pennsylvania, poet named Richard Hazy, who had a wife, Angela, and 3 kids, and so on. And they had a pet deer in the kitchen. He lived on a farm in the country. And the name of that deer was My Deer. And I don't know if it was spelled D-E-A-R or D-E-E-R. I used to pet that deer, and Angela let him out one day. The car hit him. This I learned from Angela. A fawn's ass has to be clean, or he won't shit. And if there's no mother to lick him, you have to use toilet paper lovingly. This way you become his mother. You get to name him and get to find him on Johnson Road, a 74 Mercury, heating up beside him, the owner in tears, and you, the mother, consoling him as you both drag the body into the woods, which keeps you calm, although your hands are shaking and you are breathing hard from pushing the one remaining leg into the ground without disturbing the bloated stomach or the nose that wants to stick out of the leaves, nor do you lower the shovel and flatten the ground, for you have babied the universe, and you walk with fear or care, you walk with care, and wipe your face with dirt, and kiss the murderer. Poem called Asphodel. This is about took a trip from my house. When I want to go south, I go to Trenton or even north to the train station, and it makes a stop in D.C. where they change engines from diesel to electric or vice versa. It's about a soldier, a veteran from the Korean War. He had a hat. This is all right. It's nice to hear it twice, though. It's a Korean War veteran. Asphodel. He was dead, so he was only a puff of smoke at the most. And I had to labor to see him or just to hear. And when we spoke, it was as if we were waiting in the rain together or in a shelter on 96th Street or by the side of a train in Washington, D.C., say, changing engines and patting each other's stomachs by way of intimacy. And he said what he wanted most of all when it came to trains was merely to stand on the platform looking out the dirty window at the water beyond the row of houses or the stand of trees. For it was distance he loved now, and the smell of the ocean even more than coffee. But it was only concoction. For he didn't have the senses anymore. And I forgot to say that he was a veteran and he wore a green cap that had Korea veteran printed on the face with 3 bright battle ribbons below the lettering. And I forgot to say his ears were large. The way it sometimes happens to older men, though he was dead. And he was on the train with his wife, who had red hair of sorts, and a dress. Excuse me. I have to do this, or I'll die. And he was on the train with his wife, who had red hair of sorts, and a dress that spread out like a tassel of silk. And war was on our minds, was what we talked about, and what the flowers were. The way of poppy was the emblem of World War I. And we both laughed at how there were no flowers for Korea, or any poems for that matter, though he was sad. And although he wore the hat, he said it was a stupid, useless war, unlike Achilles, Odysseus talked to in hell, who loved his war and treasured the noses he severed and the livers he ruptured. And picture them selling their asphodel in front of a supermarket or a neighborhood bank. Picture us waiting until our ears were long, just to hate just one of their dumb butcheries. And I just want to do one more known, I think I'll read this one, it's called Brookhiser. It's for my friend, my old friend, Joe Brookhiser, who would have been 100 if she had lived to next month. There's going to be a lot of celebration for her in New York City and other places. And this remembers a visit I made to her apartment. She had high blood pressure and other issues. Various times she fell down and such, breathed. Anyhow, I visited her in her apartment. She was alone. Her nurse wasn't there. So I'll just read it. It's called Brookhiser. A visit with Muriel in her New York apartment, helping her into the kitchen, making her tea, freeing her from a statement that she knew it by heart and wouldn't listen, though there was a rupture somewhere in the second sentence. And we were alone for an hour until her nurse came back and scolded her for leaving her bed and sitting with only a loosely knitted shawl over her shoulders and only a thin slip to cover her, a silk or a rayon. And when the subject was murder and lying, there was a look of abandonment to her, as it was when she let her poems fall on the floor in Philadelphia in the long, narrow theater on Walnut Street. But I never finished my tea, and I escaped before the nurse could get to me. And I turned west for the record, near Lexington, I think, against the sun, for it was March already. An extraordinary woman, an extraordinary poet, and she got a lot of attention in her life, but not the amount that she